Okay. I think I'm still here. All right, great. I see heads nodding.
You are still here. We hear you and see you.
Okay, great. Teams likes to give me a hard time, so 9 times out of 10 it works. All right, so what I'm hoping to start with today is there's sort of two parts to our AgCWIP grants and the reporting requirements. So one part is what grantees submit to us every 6 months. And then there's this other reporting responsibilities that most grantees, not everybody, should ideally be doing on an ongoing basis. So there's not necessarily a deadline, but it's something that should be incorporated as part of your grant work. So I'm going to talk about those two things a little bit separately. And then after that, we can have, open dialogue or discussions if people have questions. You can, of course, jump right in if you have a question, a burning question that you don't want to lose. So I'm going to start with what's up next, which is reporting, which is due at the end of the month for most of our AgCWIP grantees. And I will note that we've put everybody mostly on the same schedule, but you might have, there are a few that might have slightly different dates or slightly different reporting requirements because you may be operating under an older grant. So the best thing to do is to check your grant agreement because that will outline your schedule and your reporting requirements. And of course, you can always reach out to me by email or phone. Happy to talk you through any questions you might have. So primarily today, we're going to be talking through a couple of resources that are available to you as a grant recipient. And I want to start with sharing the web page first to give you a little bit of preview of where I'm going to start sort of putting some resources up for AgCWIP grantees. Because as our program has been growing a little bit every year, as our partnerships have been growing, we're acknowledging a need for a resource hub, I guess you could say. All right. So website. So on our website, I like to use the search bar. So that's typically how I get to the AgCWIP page. Although because I just did an RFP, it's not the first item. But anyway, so on the Agricultural Clean Water Initiative program page, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, this is where we're going to start a little resource hub for current grantees. But of course, we're small enough that you can, of course, call me or email me. You don't feel obligated. Don't feel like because this is there, you can't reach out to us. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We're just trying to make things a little more accessible for people. So right now it just has partner database information and pre-event form and water quality credit information, which we are going to talk about in the second part of this workshop today. So that's what's there currently. But what I'm going to start with is this AgCWIP reporting guide. So this is a PDF. I've shared it with everybody at some point via email. So if you haven't, and it was in this calendar invitation. So if you don't have a copy of it, please let me know and I'm happy to send you a copy. It was last updated in 2022. So it hasn't changed. There are a few sort of typos in here, but nothing that changes the reporting requirements substantially. Well, okay, with one caveat, the biggest difference is in this report, we tell you to send everything to agr.waterquality, which you can do, but I would encourage you to also just copy my email on all your submissions, or Noah's, who's also on this call, copy his email as well, as some, if directed to. So some of our AgCWIP grant recipients, Noah is transitioning some point of contact roles and responsibilities there. So if you're not sure who, just send it to both. All right, so this reporting guide is really the the detailed version. It's not just a one pager, it's multiple pages long, and we've tried to put as much detail in here as possible around the certain tools that we use. But this first page I think is the most helpful because it outlines the 5 tools or the 5 forms that we expect our AgCWIP grantees to be using. So the first 2 I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So we're going to skip by those to start with. Number 3 and 4, this is what you're submitting every 6 months. So this is what we expect to see by those report deadlines in your payment schedule is the Excel report template and the semi-annual Word template. I guess I should back up a minute and say that I think I might have said this already, but it should be outlined in your grant agreement. In attachment B, payment provisions is where is your payment schedule and your due date for deliverables. So just a reminder, everybody on this call, every AgCWIP grant recipient is on a deliverable-based grant agreement. So what that means is we base our payments to you. We base our assessments of the progress you're making on your work based off of your reports. So that's why we have these reporting requirements. Some grants are, expenditure based, where you might submit your expenses for the quarter and get reimbursed for actual expenditures. That's not how this grant program works. We work on a deliverable based, and the deliverables, the report showing your progress towards meeting your scope of work outlined in your grant agreement. So these reports also act as a place that you can identify any challenges or barriers you're experiencing reaching your goals or your deliverables. And it's also a place where you can highlight your achievements and successes. So it's a communication tool for us as grant managers and you as grant recipients to hold accountable to that work plan that, has been developed. So we try not to make this too complicated. The Excel sheet has some intricacies that might be a little bit annoying, but I'm going to start with the easy one. The semi-annual narrative report. This is very straightforward. Again, it's meant to be a front and back, a place where you can tell your story, give us an update, tell us where you're at. So there are some basic generic grant information here at the top. This is a pretty common gap that I see on most reports. People don't tend to fill this in, maybe because you're not sure what to put there. Reference your grant agreement. It's going to have your grant number. It's going to have the grant title on that first page of your grant agreement. Here, I'll show you. I pulled up the template. This is a template. But on your first page of your grant agreement, it has your grant number, it has your grant title, okay? So that information's all in your grant agreement. Grant category, reflecting on this form, probably should just take that out because everybody's sort of in the same grant category. But this is just a way for you to double check what your grant agreement is. Summary of key accomplishments. You can put in a bulleted list. You can put in a nice narrative, something in between. It does not need to be 5 pages long. Just articulate and direct. Challenges encountered. Please be honest with your reports. I think many of you that have been working with us in this program for a while know that we have flexibility. We understand that there's challenges. When the COVID-19 came upon us, a lot of people had to move from in-person workshops to virtual. That was a very obvious challenge. We know this summer with the weather, there might have been challenges if you're managing a equipment program. There might have been challenges with that rental program. We know that there's things that happen that are outside of our control. So don't hesitate to communicate that with us so that we understand if you are behind in a deliverable or you're not making progress on something, we understand the why. And then we also want you to include what's coming up next. This is just an opportunity for you to reflect on, are there changes you need to make? Is there a big task coming up? It's just an opportunity for you to sort of look behind and look ahead. On a semi-annual report, there is a space for highlight story photos. It's optional in the semi-annual reports, but in the final report, we do want to see 2 photos and 2 stories. And this is something that I am trying to emphasize in this grant round, because we really want to start enhancing our storytelling and sharing with the public, the farm community, the work that partners are accomplishing through these grants. And so this is an opportunity to elevate, you might already be writing a story for your newsletter. This is an opportunity in a space that we can elevate it to, our ag review newsletter or social media. We can sort of elevate what you're already doing to help get the word out about the work that you're accomplishing. Any high level questions on the narrative report? Okay, so the next one I'm going to move to is the Excel report, and this is the one that I think is a little more tedious, maybe more annoying for some people. What I'm sharing on my screen is a general template. For some of you on the call, I have created a custom Excel template, and I'm happy to do that if you would like one. And what I mean by that is, at the bottom of this sheet, there are 4 primary tabs that you're going to be entering information in: events, organizational capacity, technical assistance, and summary to date. This summary to date tab, for me and other grant managers in our agency, this is a really important tab for us because it's the summary of the deliverables. It's the summary of the numbers, the snapshot of where you're at in your work plan, in your scope of work. So when I say custom, I have modified some of these summary to date tables to be more tailored towards specific grants. So I'm happy to do that for you. This sheet is also editable. So you can also add in, if your grant has a very specific, unique deliverable to your project, you can add that in too. Right now, this table just has our core measures for AgCWIP. So if you're an AgCWIP grantee, it's very likely that you have at least one of these measures in your grant agreement. But the goal with this table is that, in column C, you would have whatever's in your grant agreement in here. If your grant agreement says you're going to organize 4 workshops, there would be a 4 here. And then this column D is actually pulling from the previous 3 sheets to demonstrate or illustrate, where you're at as far as percentage towards meeting those goals. We're working on trying to coalesce all these things together. You can see that some of it auto-populates, some of it you still need to put in yourself. We're getting there. And this is where we're at right now. So to go back to each individual tab for events, and this is also a space that there is a little bit of duplication here, but it's the system now. It's what's working for us now. So at the top of each sheet is the instructions. So if you are a lead event organizer and you are funding your time through AgCWIP, or you are funding your event through AgCWIP, you are required to complete the online Agency of Agriculture pre-event form. And it is expected that you will do this 30 days in advance of your event. If you miss those 30 days, if you forget, you can still put your event in. We still want you to use the online form and put it in the spreadsheet. And I'll get to the form in just a minute. But on the form itself asks for a lot more information. It includes, what other organizations are you working with? What are your target audiences? How are you advertising? How many credit hours is this going to be? It goes through a lot more questions than this spreadsheet. But one thing I do want to remind folks of is, we do want all events to be submitted through this event form. And when I say event, I mean like public facing event, not your board meetings don't need to go through this pre-event form, but your public facing events should go through this event form, regardless of if you want water quality credits or not. On the form, it asks, is this a water quality event credit event? Is this not a water quality credit event? So there's places to put that information in. So after you do your pre-event form, we also want you to document your events in this spreadsheet. And part of it is just to keep that deliverable counting in one place. But this is also a space, one thing that the pre-event form does not do, because it happens before the event, is it doesn't capture what the outcomes of your event are. So this event sheet and this spreadsheet is really intended to capture core data. So anything that is highlighted blue is what's duplicated from the pre-event form. But anything that's in yellow over here is post-event information. So we really, this is where we want you, indicating what the outcomes of your events were per your grant deliverables. So most events that are funded through AgCWIP are going to ask, how many people came to your event? Was it evaluated? Did people learn something? I mean, those are just very basic, very minimum questions. And I'll come back to this events tab when we go over the pre-event form. All right, the second tab is organizational capacity. This tab in particular is one that we see a lot of questions around and often see incomplete. So in this space, not every AgCWIP grantee might need to use this, but this is the space where if your grant is funding staff time, this is sort of a one and done entry. So if, I had a grant and I'm funding a half a position, it's freezing up. I'm going to go in. You don't need to put the name. You can put program coordinator, whatever the title is. You can put the name if you want. And I'm funding half of it. And, they started when the grant started. That's all you need to put in. You put it in once and you're done. Okay. You don't need to put in like the hours worked how many hours they worked in the last 6 months, or, you don't need to go into that fine detail. Just put in the general overarching staff support that's occurring under your grant. The other thing that we would like to see here is if your grant has staff training included in it. This is also a space that you can keep your staff training records. You can get as detailed as each hour in webinar, or we are okay if you want to, I know some organizations already have training tracking systems. So if you already have a training and tracking system that could be, a copy could be produced, you can aggregate per staff if you'd like to in this section. And I'm happy to talk through that more specifically for particular grants, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. But this is a place where we want to see, your staff training also captured. Because again, the summary to date spreadsheet is pulling these numbers. Organizational capacity. Okay, other things that you're going to log in here is, if you have in your agreement that you're going to complete one strategic plan, this is where you're going to put it. If you have in your agreement that you're going to purchase a GPS, this is where you're going to put it. Okay, board meetings, we moved to organizational capacity. So if your grant agreement is supporting board meetings or board development, we want to see it in the spreadsheet. And again, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's 6, maybe 7 fields of data to put in. But please reach out if you have an activity that you're not really sure where to put. Let us know. We can figure out where to put it in here. And it might be something that doesn't go in the spreadsheet. It might just go in your narrative report. So we're happy to work with you one-on-one to figure out where to put it. Okay. Are there questions on the organizational capacity tab? All right. So technical assistance is the last activity area tab in here, and this one is optional. What is not optional, which we'll talk about in a moment, is if you are providing one-on-one technical assistance to farms, if you are visiting farms, that should be tracked in our partner database, and that should be ongoing. So as you complete your visits, you should put them in the partner database. What's optional is if you want to use this, Excel spreadsheet. We have matched the columns with a partner database export. I do need to check on this because I know some reporting functions just got updated in the partner database. But theoretically, we tried to build this so that if you did want to run a partner database export, you could theoretically copy and paste into here. We know many of you probably have your own farm visit case management tracking systems. So that's why we've made this spreadsheet particularly optional, because, we don't want you duplicating your time, entering data into each Excel cell. We really want you to have the flexibility to maximize your current organizational operations while also meeting our reporting requirements. So this spreadsheet itself is optional. The partner database entries are required. Now, the caveat is that the partner database does not track whether a partner database export doesn't correlate confidently whether that producer adopted a new conservation practice or implemented a conservation practice with your assistance. So in some cases, we are able to track that if you're doing conservation practice surveys or technical assistance. There are some grantees that we have some codes for that, but generally speaking, that's something that we rely on our AgCWIP grantees to self-track and self-report on. So while we can do an export and see how many partner database visits you've done, it's a little bit harder for us to, we're relying on you as the grantee to report what the outcomes of your technical assistance visits were. And then in the summary to date table, that is reflected. So as you can see down here, number of unique farms and number of visits, that's where we're sort of encouraging. If you want to put it in the spreadsheet, you can. If you want to just enter in your number from your own tracking sheet, that's fine too. And same with conservation practice surveys. We do not have a formal reporting template for that. That's really, we're relying on you as the grantee to track that and submit it. We do have mechanisms in the partner database to see where conservation practices are being mapped and who's assisting farms with that. We do have mechanisms to do that. And so that's why it's not its own tracking sheet within this workbook. So it was a little bit of a quick run through. Does anyone have any questions right off on this sheet?
Right.
Yeah, Mary, I have one question. Oh, sorry. Should we put past events in? Because I didn't know, anyway, we had events last fall that I don't think went through the event tracking form because there wasn't a staff person there, but should I put those fall events into the tracking form even though they're past now?
I would prioritize putting them here in this Excel tracking spreadsheet. I would prioritize putting them in this one.
Okay, thanks.
I was curious, under the technical assistance tab, for the water quality ID, like the WQID, if a farm isn't in the partner database, this only has happened a couple times, but where do I find that water quality ID, or do they have one?
So if you're working with a farm that is not in the partner database, we do have a new farm request form that we ask partners to submit if possible. So on the partner database webpage, which I can link, there's a form for new farms. And so if you submit this form, they'll be entered in and then they'll be assigned a water quality ID.
Great, that makes sense.
Hey, Mary.
Hey, Lindsay.
How's it going? Sorry I got here a
Good.
little late.
No
Um,
worries.
Thanks for hosting this. So one thing I'm just thinking about in terms of reporting in here is like one of my approaches, right? Like for example, I work with Jeff. Jeff enters a bunch of his stuff in the partner database, or Netlook looks at our acreage and whatnot. And then I say, okay, right, you worked with these 15 farmers. Of these 15 farmers, how many of them implemented a new practice? And like, that's what I'm like funneling in then when I answer some of these questions. I guess my question is like, is that the right approach? Is that what you're looking for here?
I think so. I mean, I think, as we want to have some sort of trust with the grantees that you're sort of managing those intricacies and those details. And, if you indicate, yes, this farm is, adopting practices, we're going to accept that. We're not going to, call the farmer and say, is Jeff working with you? Like, did you do this cover crop because Jeff visited? So I think that works, Lindsay. At this point, we have a lot of data, we collect a lot of data, but we just don't have it streamlined enough to, do it a different way yet. But maybe in the future, I don't know.
Great. And so like if I'm working with someone, right, and they broadcast on 100 acres and they do that year after year, the first year is a new practice. And then like, let's say in year 7, they drill instead of broadcast. That would be an improved practice that we would then put in there.
Yeah, so we've accepted, improved practices or enhanced, increased. It doesn't necessarily need to be, something innovative on the farm. And I think, let me see here. I'm working with one screen today. So, in our reporting guide, which hasn't been updated for a couple of years, so I may need to update a few of these things, but we did try to describe, well, we're not talking about that right now, but we did sort of try to describe like what a new conservation practice implemented is. We talk about, if the farm's expanding cover crop, that's what we're talking about, because we all know that, yeah. So I think there's some room for, interpretation there. Yep. I will note in the past I'm just noticing this now as I'm reading through this, but we have also offered to people, like, if they're not implementing a new practice, are they resolving a water quality concern? So those are also criteria that you can consider as far as like, what's your impact to assisting that farm? But again, we're not asking for the details around that. We wouldn't ask, we're just kind of looking for a yes, no, like, yeah, there were some positive outcomes from this visit. We want to continue working with this farm type of high level summaries. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go to, all right, so those are the two things that are due every 6 months, like to be submitted with an invoice, is that semi-annual narrative report and then the Excel spreadsheet. And what Noah and I have been trying to do is when we send our reminders out, just send the last spreadsheet you submitted to us, because the spreadsheet should be a cumulative reflection of all of the work that you've done. All right, so that's like what's tangibly due every 6 months. Now, in between those 6-month reporting periods and ongoing, there are a couple things that we want you to be mindful of as AgCWIP grantees. And that is the partner database. So we were just there at that page, and this isn't a partner database training, but I do want to just point to a couple resources that could be helpful for you. So if you're providing direct technical assistance to farmers, we do want you and your staff to be trained to use the partner database and be entering in those farm visits or those practices that you might be mapping, if that's part of your grant, in the partner database. And so there is a quality assurance project plan that we ask everybody to review. It talks about what kind of practices, when you can count them, how to log a visit, what codes to use. Well, this is the quality assurance project plan is really more about practice mapping and practice verification, I guess you could say. New this fall, so some of you might not know about this because we haven't really done a hard launch yet. There is an online partner database training that is available to watch. So whether you're a new user or an old user, this is a good resource for some of those basic functions and responsibilities as a partner database user. There is a user agreement. So just a reminder, because everyone's on the call, your use of the partner database is part of being an AgCWIP grantee and part of receiving clean water funding, but that shouldn't necessarily be used for, personal information gathering or information sharing, that type of thing. It's really meant to help you do the work that's in your grant agreement. And then there is part of that, there is a user agreement that you need to submit before you, I think, are fully blessed to use the system. If you have questions about the partner database, Judson Peck is our primary contact for the partner database. Although you may hear from any of us at the Agency of Agriculture, because we do quarterly quality checks on the data. So quarterly, we export and review data that is inputted into the partner database. And that's when we identify, errors that are happening not only on our staff behalf, like staff, we make mistakes too, but also partners. So you might hear from me or Noah. There's a couple other people on staff that work with partners to help remedy any errors that might exist. All right. So that's something that we really want to see happen. And one, I will just make a plug to that, although, there's a semi-annual report due at the end of this month, January, and the next one isn't due until the end of July. The state fiscal year is actually on a July to June schedule. And so you're probably going to see some email reminders come out around April and May, pleading that you get your partner database visits in and your information in as up to date as possible, because at the end of June, we do a full export for the fiscal year, and that's what goes into our annual report. And so we just like that data to be as up to date as possible. It does, if you put it in a little late, it does end up, it just is delayed a couple years. So that's just it's an important piece of data for us in continuing this funding program. So just keep that in mind for partner database usage. The other thing, I will make a plug with the partner database. I said this wasn't a partner database training, but one thing I do want to just share as well is that well, this is I don't want to pull up farm information because this is recorded, but the partner database does have a grants tab now. So as a user, you can view what state grants a farm you are working with might have. So that's just another piece of information that might be valuable to you as you're working with producers or doing outreach, and sort of helping farms navigate the various programs that are out there. Okay. The other one that is really important that I think many of us forget about is regardless of whether you're public facing event. So again, I'm talking about like workshops, hikes, farm events that are open to the public. Maybe even if they're a smaller group of the public, like a school group, that's okay too. I'm not talking about like board meetings and those type of things. I'm talking about that education and outreach type events. We want those all to go through this request form. And one of the neat things about this form is if any of you have dabbled around with some of the Microsoft Office functionality, we actually have this tied into Power Automate. And so this whole process is you put in your information and you're going to get, for those of you that have been doing them, you're going to get automatic emails that confirm submission, and then after your event prompt you to send in your how many people came to your event. And the reason why we're having people fill out this form is because, let's see here. It is auto-populating our, is it still in here? I might have taken it out. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. So not all of you might have access to this link. I can add you. It is a link from our state SharePoint. So there's like a 3-step verification process, but once you're in, you're in. But filling out that form automatically populates this event tracking sheet. And this is what we send to our Clean Water Fund program, the state's Clean Water Fund program, like over at DEC and ANR. So this information, again, is all part of our agency's reporting on this grant program. So that's a helpful way for us to aggregate everything, but it can also be helpful for you as a grantee to see what else is going on around the state. You know, what are your partners up to? Maybe there's an event you see on there that you want to go to. Okay, so this is a collection of all of the events that are being supported in some way or another by the AgCWIP program. And yeah, so it prompts you. So after your event, you'll get a prompt email that asks you for how many people came. And this is really like all the details surrounding the event, whereas the event tab on the Excel tracking sheet is more about like the core pieces of information. You know, what is your event, when was it, and what were the outcomes of your event. So those are the two differences between these forms. But you can see, you know, there's a lot of events in here. So a lot of you have been using this form. And the only other piece I'll add here is that we know that there's a lot of collaboration on events between partners. So if you're collaborating on an event with a partner, just make sure you're communicating with who is going to do the form. That was another reason why we created the form, was to sort of reduce redundancy. And then what I will add with everybody, share this with everybody, is on the event spreadsheet. I know that the way that we built our agreements in 2022 was events as lead event organizer, and it's become very clear and apparent that most events are organized in collaboration with other AgCWIP grantees. So communicate with each other, decide what your role is. If you're not a lead event organizer, or if you decide to be a co-organizer, please still put it in this spreadsheet. You can select co-organizer, okay, and we can consider that towards your deliverables. If you're finding yourself in a position where you're like, okay, I put in that I was going to lead 16 events, but it turns out I'm really a co-organizer and I want to split this with my fellow partner, please just put the event. So even if you don't do so there are occasions when you're not going to do the pre-event form, but you do want to put it in your spreadsheet so you can get that credit. Okay. Are there questions on the pre-event form? Oh,
Yeah.
Lindsay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I've got another question that might be kind of unique, but what if our partner is the Agency of Agriculture? So in particular, I'm thinking about like the manure certification trainings that we put on.
Mhm.
Should I still fill out that form, or you folks know what's happening? It's all good. Because I will put it in the tracking sheet, right?
Yeah. Put it in the tracking sheet, and I wouldn't worry about the form because we're co-hosting. So we've already got that. All right, I saw another hand, I thought. Maybe not. Oh, that's me. All right, so I am going to stop recording, and then we can open it up for more specific questions if people would like to. And we'll go from there. I'm happy to stay on as long as I need to help answer questions. Again, if you do want to talk through specifically or want to, talk through more one-on-one, I'm happy to do that as well. All right, so let me